Probably going to be a lot more comfortable navigating these matchups. I think he's got the advantage, but at the same time, we've seen historically how Akamarured deals with being on losers. It's like he is in vengeance right now. So really nervous.
We're kicking off the grand finals. This is it to decide who is the champion of the Starforged Legends season. Fatina and Akamarured getting into their groove, and they're going to kick things off with a Forest versus Blood matchup. Exo, take it away.
Absolutely. So this is one of these crazy matchups, right? Vengeance Blood is so hard to pilot against OTK Roach, I feel, because of just the immediate presence of Roach combo. This is kind of like what we said before, playing against Ramp Dragon combo, is just that you always have to expect the damage, and can you ever play Belphegor? It's a really tough match to navigate as Vengeance Blood, I feel.
Definitely. Actually, most of my experience playing Vengeance Blood into Roach is just that I would dare to go for the Belphegor anyway, and then just get utterly destroyed by Roach like the next following turn. It would do like too much damage for me to ever make up. But you know, Akamarured's list, as we did observe, is a lot more on the defensive side of things. It doesn't try to go as deep for the damage or board presence. It just goes for a couple defensive options and just tries to get enough damage eventually. And I think Fatina's list is going to be just on the slow side itself, enough to kind of start to take the back foot against all of that. Cassiopeia and Aaron are really good against a lot of decks, but you know, what do you do when they just get eaten up by an Emeralda? It's a really hard one to call for me just because of the way that they built these.
Sure. And of course, we see Fatina doing what Forest does best in the early turns, playing Infinite Bramble. Actually decides not to kill the Urias here. Very surprising to me.
If Fatina decides, you know, I'm just going to go for some cycle. I'm not going to be playing anything out this turn, so I don't have to deal with it yet. Deals a little bit more damage, but he gives Akamarured this huge initiative to just start pushing for damage, because not dealing with them right there doesn't make it any easier in the future.
I think in part of my mind, not dealing with the Urias that turn costs so much damage. Like, we're talking about an Evo target, right? A lot easier to or come over the top of a 3-3 than it is for a 3-5 in general. You're taking this extra damage here as well, and I feel like your board state would have been a little bit better, right? You still would have had things left over as opposed to just getting traded into with these Angel of the Words and things like that. So, just interesting mind there.
And it's not like Akamarured has anything that really works with bans or buffs them. It's just kind of a throwaway 2-cost card that he doesn't want to clog Airjammer with. So, well, I think we've seen this out of Fatina a lot as well, and that Fatina makes his plays very quickly. He's very, very fast with decisions, even when he plays difficult decks or matchups. Like, I mean, he's the fastest PTP Forest player I've ever seen. He probably already had it in his head when he saw him play Urias and Bats. And he had the Wood of Brambles in hand. He was probably right then in his mind, like, I'm going to get rid of these bats, and I'm going to move on with my turn. And that's just kind of how he plays.
Absolutely, and I think this might even be a little misstep from Akamarured, because Cassiopeia is really the best 6-drop for Fatina to play. He kind of played directly into that. Had he played the Spiderweb Imp instead, would have at least forced an Evo point out of Fatina if he wanted to clear out the entire board.
Honestly, I'm finding it difficult to track and, you know, keep pace with how quickly they're playing after kind of seeing how thoughtful and careful Onion Sheep was about all his turns previously. But
yes,
you know, these are two players that I think are just, yeah, Akamarured in his comfort zone, and Fatina just playing the way he plays.
Yep, I think Fatina has definitely playtests. I want to say it feels like more than most other competitors, just by the very nature of how fast he does play. He knows his decks inside and out. He knows these matchups, it feels like, inside and out. And it really just comes down to, does he get the right cards or not, which I think is really pushing Fatina to be one of the better players on the U side for me, just the way he plays.
Right, definitely. And like, it's rare you see a player who can bring such a strong variety of lists. We already talked about this for a while before, but it's just worth stressing. Really, just anything in the game feels like it's in Fatina's comfort zone to play. It just really comes down to whether it goes right for him across every game. So, first Emeralda down and still not much progress made for Fatina here. He's still quite low, but Akamarured not really holding very much burst right now. Say Fatina's on a clock until Akamarured drops or draws a bomb like Karagos, or a source of fast draw like Belphegor. Then he has all the time in the world to figure out this Roach combo. But until then, tough.
Now, even in saying that, though, with the Evo point, anytime he draws this second Roach is really good. And, ooh, playing Tias again. Tias are fantastic in this matchup. Doesn't even feel the need to play it right now, being at 12. I think Fatina's in the hard driver's seat in this game. I feel like he's got everything going for him. He's made the game extend super long. He's got a ton of defensive options. He already has Roach and Nature's Guidance, just looking for one other Roach. And if Akamarured plays anything like this Belphegor, it's going to get even tougher, but he does have Spider Whims to back this up.
Right, which is really fortunate for him, because I got a little bit nervous there when I thought I saw only one in hand. But this is a lot of defense on board as well. He knows Fatina just got a Cassiopeia back, which, by the way, I think is the strongest Ancient Elf turn we've really seen in like the history of like the past little while. So really strong way to kind of play around the comeback of the Cassiopeia.
Now, he still might decide to play this Cassiopeia, so he could play a Fairy, Evo into one of the Spiderweb Imps, and that would put the defense down to 8. No, and then only 7 damage left over. So not quite being able to clear the entire board here, just 1 point of damage shy.
I think he can do that if he's also willing to give away his Fairy Circle for that, but figures he can just go for the Goblin Mage as well and get his Roach on the same line of thought.
Yep, get that out. You can even play out the Tia, Cassiopeia. Okay, this is a better way to do it. So Fatina knows better than I. He could have also played the Tia to put up even more power and a ward on the board, something like that. So just feeling really comfortable right now.
Yeah, I think that was a really, really like sort of significant swing for Fatina, in fact, because although Akamarured made his turn safe by going into that double Spiderweb Imp, that's really kind of the play for him. That's the full commitment of his whole hand right now, even as a follow-up, because he doesn't have more defensive options. He needs to hope that he's put down enough pressure that Fatina's not able to respond to it with a Roach combo.
Yeah, this is a tricky line. I didn't actually do the math on if you actually die before the Roach combo hits you, but I don't think so, because of how low Akamarured already is, because of that Belphegor. He doesn't even have to full Roach combo here. He just plays out the 2 Roaches when he has enough. Right now.
Right.
But it's funny though. If Akamarured was at just a little bit more life, these Uriuses might have actually prevented a Roach combo.
Yeah, that was actually like really nerve-wracking to watch. Is like, oh, but Fatina navigates that so quickly. Like, it took him no time whatsoever to think about how he's going to get the Roach damage in without playing more than or without playing 5 or more followers this turn. With a handful of fairies, a lot of people might have actually given up on that train of thought, but it takes him no time to spot it whatsoever.
What I find interesting about this no-ban format, too, is really what these players choose to bring to the table first, right? I think playing Vengeance Blood first into this lineup is kind of like asking just to get a free loss, right? Because most of these decks are good against Vengeance Blood, right? So I think you need to pick your very particular matchup. I think its best one in this lineup is against Mid Shadow. So maybe Akamarured was feeling like Mid Shadow was going to be Fatina's first choice, and maybe that's why he brought it, but that's taking, like I said, a big gamble, because OTK Roach and Burn Rune very good against Vengeance Blood. And now he's just bringing it again into Burn Rune. I don't like the strategy here. I don't like this.
I think what Akamarured is going for is, I think he just wants to get it out of the way. He wants to find the victory it's going to get him, and then move on into these other lists that he's been playing out. But once again, I feel like whereas Akamarured has spent the entire season sort of playing in his comfort zone, has never shirked Mid Shadow a single time, now playing both this, which has been banned out for the entirety of the last time that we even saw him play, also a Forest deck that he hasn't really had that much tournament experience with, I feel like, outside of just maybe whatever playtesting he's done before it. It doesn't seem to me like he's playing comfortably, whereas Fatina is just quick. He knows how to play all these lists. He's probably had plenty tournament experience with several of them before, or at least been testing them in absolute excess of what it is even like expected. So where we see that happen is we see Akamarured maybe making some tougher choices on what decks to bring in what order. Maybe he is more panicky, just kind of wants to get them out of the way, whereas Fatina is just kind of calmly going one by one.
Well, the problem with just getting this deck out of the way as a win also means that you're pitting it against its 2 worst matchups on your opposing side of the board. So getting it out of the way could just turn into a quick 2-0 for Fatina here. which is kind of why I'm thinking, where's your mind at right here, Akamarured? Not that it's a mistake. He could think that it's his best deck and that it has a winning percentage against a lot of these decks, and I just differ in thought from that.
All right. You know, Burn Rune just seems like such a tough matchup to me. At the very least, it's fortunate for Akamarured that Fatina's not opening too well here. It's kind of tough to dump all of this. The Oz is not going to get him very far. And very soon, I think, especially with an Evo up on this turn, Akamarured can just kind of get onto the board without much risk to himself.
That's right. And I want to take a look at Fatina's list here. Is he running Calamitous Curse as like a tech card in his deck or anything like that? Does he have any like techie things going on?
I think it's the same as last time. Correct me if I'm wrong if this was not Fatina, but he's got the triple Master Mage Levi and double one copy of one of Professor of Taboos and one of Mutagenic Bolt next to it. And other than that,
right.
Very standard list.
Exactly right. He is playing 2 Mage of Nightfalls and only 1 Red Hot Ritual, so that's another thing to take note of in his deck.
Ooh.
Yeah, that's not a feels good play.
Yeah, Tempo Wizardess of Oz, which is, I think, even though it looks pretty bad, I think it's a very brilliant use of Wizardess of Oz, because what he's, I think, gambling for here is if I draw a bunch of spells and this dies, then I manage to get my Evo swing off of it anyway, and I have another one in hand I can just refill. Whereas, if he doesn't draw any spells, those are cards he gets to keep, and being able to shuffle in and just find one of his Master Mage Levi's is a really, really powerful way to go there.
Right. I also like it because every turn that you can force Vengeance Blood to be defensive instead of aggressive, aka evoing into it or using a Diabolic Drain, is a turn that you've given yourself to kind of progress your game state, which I really like.
Interesting. Gonna hold on to this Master Mage Levi because figuring he can just handle this with Halo Golem, he can kind of save this larger bomb in case Akamarured floods against him anytime soon.
Yep, and what we're going to see, honestly, is Fatina just playing as defensively as he can until Akamarured pushes himself into Vengeance, but it doesn't look like that's happening this game. With the Caraboss, that is a very different avenue now that Akamarured has to win this game. Now, he can play the more defensive role and wait for Fatina to deal damage to him and then just play out Dark Generals and things like that. So I think, from this point on, because of that Caraboss, that Akamarured is in a very comfortable position.
Yeah, and a really cool call for him to make as well, even having an Emeralda in hand, 3 copies in the deck. Figures out all I need is the progressive damage. I've already advanced enough to where I'm poised to take this game, so I'm just going to play it on curve, on 6, basically discard the Emeralda, and just throw out all the damage as I get it.
Yeah, and next turn, if Fatina does in fact put him into Vengeance, that game will end. So now it's just about Fatina navigating the rest of this game to not just straight up die to this Caraboss, but I don't think there's any way to do that, especially now that we see Razor Recalls in hand and things like that, so.
So interesting. I'd always thought that this was a very advantageous matchup for Burn Rune, but Akamarured just figured out the right avenue to get this win in with Vengeance. Just like, didn't really play too aggressively, needed to spend some time trading, but managed to navigate towards a win condition that would just slowly take Fatina out of it.
Absolutely, and that goes to show you how good of Akamarured is a player, right? Like, he plays Vengeance Blood. He's obviously played it enough to know that he's comfortable bringing it on multiple weeks of a competitive series, right? But he knows not to really put himself low against Rune. That's where it comes down to. Like, Rune can actually just play the defense game until Blood puts themselves into Vengeance. Then they can push all of their damage from hand, all of their Levi's, Halo Golems, all face, and just kind of end the game in quick order. But if you play at a high health total as the Vengeance Blood player, Caraboss specifically, like if that Caraboss didn't exist, I feel like that game would be completely different. But with Caraboss, it gives the deck a new way to actually defeat something like that by just staying at a high health total and just using card advantage instead, which I really like. Yeah,
where it really interested me, in fact, was a lot of players don't tend to run Emeralda on the side of Caraboss. And even when they do, when they draw the Emeralda, they think, okay, well, Caraboss on 7, so I'll still have this option open to me. But where Akamarured kind of shows us a new way of thinking about it is, you can still run them both together, but use the Caraboss once you've identified that it is the way to win the game. So even if you have some dead cards in your hand, don't panic. Everything else in your hand is going to constitute the rest of your turns for the rest of the game. Your opponent never really has to care or know, or even notice that you ever drew Emeraldas in the first place if they're not what you need for the matchup. So, as you said, really phenomenal play from Akamarured. Something to study, definitely, from everyone else looking to play decks like these.
100%. And this time, we actually get to see Akamarured with a real curve. He was able to push a win out even without having a real curve last time, so I feel like he is ahead slightly now, at least more than he was before with just having Sybils on turn 5 and 6 to play. He actually has ramp early. He's got life gain. He also has his end game. He doesn't have Queen of the Dreadseed combo yet, but he has a lot more cards to draw in the near future.
Yeah, funnily enough, the game where he didn't have a curve at all was the game that he won as well.
Right.
No ramp whatsoever until that later part of the game. But here, I think this is a really tougher side of the matchup. I mean, we've sort of looked at this matchup almost a billion times by now, it feels like. But I think Fatina's a bit more prepared for it. I feel like his list is more geared to be aggressive. And Akamarured, he has a lot of value grinder cards in it, like Ouroboros and the like, that I don't think really do the job versus Shadow most of the time.
One thing that Ouroboros does do in this list is, I remember a comment you made the last time we saw this deck, is there's not a lot of reach to get the person from, 2 or 3 or something to 0. Ouroboros does, in fact, give you that outlet. It's not a Storm Follower, so it doesn't worry about wards or anything like that. It can just get the damage to face if need be, and I think that's kind of what it's for. I think it's for that random top deck scenario where it's just like, okay, I really need to just draw face damage, and my opponent's at a high enough life total to where my combo didn't kill them. Gives me that little bit of extra reach.
I definitely see that. I feel like the thought crossed my mind as well when I saw it earlier, but it didn't occur to me. But yeah, even 3 damage, like, that's enough. Especially when you're in a situation where you can just save or hold on to your Evo points for the entirety of the game. Also, I like how Fatina navigated that last turn. Didn't want to commit too many resources, noticed that Akamarured was playing very carefully around Little Soul Squasher, so just tosses away a Belinus, keeps his threats behind his Bone Chimera's body up. Though,
wait a minute, this game is just over. This game's just over. Akamarured has the damage in hand. He's already got another Forte Erd combo in hand to push for 12 damage. And he already knows it.
Oof. Right.
That's a crazy foresight concede to me from Fatina. He's just like, you know what? If Akamarured made that play, put me to 11 instead of trading for any of my board, he probably just has the win in his hand. And, like a good poker player, he read it to a T. Didn't even give Akamarured a chance to actually win.
That is an incredible concede, actually, though, thinking about it. When you pointed out the lethal, I was like, oh yeah, he does. And then he concedes, and I was like, wait, did he hear you?
Right.
Are you conveying this to him somehow? But no, I think that's just another one of those things. If Fatina's a very fast player, if he gets that read off of Akamarured, even if, imagine Akamarured was just playing fast to bluff it, then that would have been pretty comedic. But just asides, I don't want to see it. I feel like I can still probably take out this forest list, perhaps. Just probably playing around his own capacity to tilt, if anything. It's just very interesting concede, but moving on from that.
Yeah, moving on, I think this matchup is very straightforward. This is, can Forest push enough damage before big threats like Master Mage Levi start dominating the board? Because once we get to the end game, Fairy Driver is all that's left, and you have to rely on it for damage, and it might be hard fighting through wards and otherwise just bigger boards than it can create in the end game. So, see how fast Akamarured can push this.
Yeah, there are some really, really strong cards Fatina could hit here, like Magic Illusion, a strong 2-drop, but being on the play and sort of being able to get all these cards out means that he has a very nice likelihood of actually getting onto the board and keeping it. Whereas usually Forest will just push its opponents off with Wood of Brambles around like turns 2 and 3.
This might be the first Forest game we've seen on cast that Wood of Brambles is not in hand. I say that, right. I'm caster cursing it. It will probably be top decked here, but this might be the first game without Wood of Brambles that we've seen in a long time.
It's just like it's more of a staple in my head to Forest nowadays than even is Ancient Elf, which is something that just amazes me.
Right. Yeah, it's crazy. Ancient Elf used to be like, no, 3 of every Forest deck every single time without question. Now it's like maybe you use it as a tech card or something, but yeah.
Well, here we get to see at least a very interesting question of how Akamarured, or when he's going to throw out the elf for Eliza. We saw Fatina make this exact decision, in fact, earlier against an opponent, so he's probably got it in his mind as well. Akamarured probably doesn't want to use it anytime sooner than having to deal with Master Mage Levi, but there are some instances where that just doesn't end up working out anyway.
Right. He definitely has to take this board back, and he's losing it very easily. And this kind of goes a lot to show of how much weight Wood of Brambles actually adds to the deck and what it feels like when you don't draw it.
The hunt has only begun.
Right. I mean, Fatina didn't really have a very strong series of followers on the board either way, not really pushing it aggressively. It is just that Akamarured is having to answer a much more difficult question than he otherwise might if he was protected from any trades Fatina could make.
Mm-hmm. But I think Fatina has a perfect game plan of just playing the control deck in this matchup. I mean, that's why he's got the Professor of Taboos. He knows that he can transition one way or another if he needs to. That's exactly what he's sliding into right now.
A little bit of a tough call there, but figures, what a reach could Akamarured possibly have, and just decides to dome him with the Mage of Nightfall there. It's a lot of damage into Master Mage Levi. I feel like whatever Akamarured goes for this turn, if he's anticipating the Levi, we're going to see him play out the Lisa probably, or if he wants to just dump that game plan out, he's going to go for the Aperia and hope that he can find like some kind of O2K off the next few cards of his deck with the Roach. Really, really tough call to have to make.
Let's see, so we're looking at straight up 10 damage. There's no lethal setup, it looks like. And he's board locked. So this means that Akamarured was definitely trying to find a lethal over 2 turns because he's not going to really last beyond this next turn. But he does have a Roach. He doesn't have a bounce spell. Can he find it?
Would Airbound Barrage be enough? Ooh, Wood of Brambles, definitely not.
10 damage combo. So if he had Airbound Barrage, you need 5 for the Roach combo just to bounce with itself, and then he did have a Fairy to play. So it would have been Fairy Roach for 2, Bounce Roach for 4. So that would have been 6 plus 7, 13 plus Evo only 15. So even with an Airbound Barrage, it was not a lethal setup this turn.
Oof, rough. He went for that Aperia pretty quickly too, but I get that feeling a lot when I play aggro as well. Of sometimes when you're playing aggro, it's like the game just tells you you lost when you're just not on the board anymore. The opponent has a lot left over, you'll never clear it. And you're just like, okay, what's the one last thing as aggro that I can fall on to try to win the game? And that's really just followers that can attack in a way that your opponent just can't deal with. So, cool way to go for it, but...
Yeah, well, that's why we see a lot of competitor players actually opt away from aggressive styles the later and later you get into tournaments, is because of that very nature. Even if you've built your deck optimally, even if you're playing the right matchups, sometimes you just don't get the right curve. You can't fill up the board on the right turn. You run out of gas. You don't draw your Wood of Brambles early, things like that. You know what I mean? Like little tiny things that over the course of an entire matchup just automatically make you lose to no fault of your own.
Right. So I think Akamarured went for a very interesting series of plays there. He knows he's right above lethal range of a Master Mage Levi. Plays the Lisa out to protect the 8-7. Huh.
Wait a minute.
Did I speak too soon, actually?
Wait a minute. Fatina
I totally
did not
spoke too soon, didn't I?
Clear this board. Why did he not clear this board?
Well, Master Mage Levi wasn't able to push any damage over the Lisa that went off on the 8-7. Would he have been able to trade into
There was
it?
no way to do it. Yeah.
Huh.
He just played Hyperia, protected Hyperia, and that's good enough. Akamarured is gonna even this up. Finding that little tiny. Never mind. You know what? We're completely wrong. We don't know what we're talking about, Mofu.
Yeah,
They should bring in some other casters. Yeah, I don't think we know what's going on anymore.
Anyone else would have noticed it. I mean, while we were talking about it, I started to see a little bit, but amazing.
Akamarured with a 3-1 win will reset the bracket, and an incredible line at the end there, really navigating his way out of the lethal and making sure he had enough stats. I think the key thing was him trading the Evolved Liza into the Mage of Nightfall.
Yep.
And maintaining the toughness, because it was a scenario where there was no evolution orbs left, the followers on board didn't have enough damage, and that Liza spell protection so aptly timed on Akamarured's part. That was an incredible finish, and that goes to show just how strong Aperia is. I think that's one of the cards that has been really key for a lot of Roach aggro decks as kind of the the staple to close things out on that 5 play point turn. Imperi has given a lot of that firepower to Forestcraft decks, but guys, because Akamarured has won that match, that means he has reset the bracket because Fatina was on winner's side, so that is Fatina's life essentially. And just like in last season, we see ourselves in a scenario again where Akamaru faces off against Fatina one more time. And if Akamarured wins this one, he will be the grand champion for 2 seasons in a row, Starforged Legends as well as Wonderland Dreams. And Fatina once again, never the bride, always the bridesmaid, as they say. We'll see if that ends up being the scenario, but Fatina definitely going to be watching out, desperately trying to avoid that outcome. And of course, Fatina, if he wins this, that still means he's a grand champion, so he's got a good shot. He needs to figure out what he needs to adapt and change to help him out of this scenario. Talk to me about some of the kind of the ways that these decks have played out. I think for myself, kind of looking at how the games played out, the most important win for Akamarured was definitely his Vengeance Blood. To me, that seems like the one that 100%. Is the hardest for him to earn that win for. What were your guys' thoughts? Let's start with Exo.
Yeah, I mean, I think that says it the best right there. I feel like Vengeance Blood, had it not won the game against Burn Rune, that match flips completely on the other side, right? And I feel like that Burn Rune should win that matchup more often than not. What we have been seeing, though, in the last few weeks is that Burn Rune is just not up to snuff. It's just not always doing what it needs to do, even when it has a decent curve. It's really awkward. Like, sometimes it just feels like the best deck in the room, and sometimes it just falls flat on its face. So, that's really what it hinged upon, right? Fatina just couldn't find a win with his Burn Rune deck against matchups where I feel like it's actually pretty good.
What about you? What do you think, Wofu, about how that particular match played out?
Having now watched it, I feel like Akamarured has made some really interesting deck decisions in that a lot of his decks are positioned to beat or have a pretty fair chance versus Burn Rune. So I think Fatina, now recognizing this, is now going for the list of his own that he feels maybe the least confident about. He wants to get this win with it early. So whereas Akamarured really needs the win with Vengeance Blood early to kind of solidify a safe space for the rest of his lists, we really just see an interesting match come down here. This could be a very, very important game 1 for each player.
It'll also be important, especially if we get to talk to Akamarured, just his game plan going into it, because he did not switch it up and Fatina did, right? So Akamarured doing the predictable thing in playing Vengeance Blood first again, Fatina switching it up a little bit and playing his Burn Rune deck. Do you think it lends any credence to Akamarured having a very specific plan in this best of 5 here, to where he is playing this Vengeance Blood first? There has to be.
I mean, absolutely. Maybe we'd have more insight on this if we got to see how he played, or if someone had left his Vengeance Blood unbanned previously. It is really the one window of true unpredictability that Akamarured has as a person who just kind of goes for the exact same thing every game. Is that we just didn't get to see how he does this, and Fatina has no data on it. So, I think we just see ourselves where, like, Fatina brings lists of all different kinds, but now perhaps overestimating how well Burn Rune would have worked in this matchup or in these games versus Akamarured, whereas Akamarured is just kind of comfortably going at it. There's a lot of experience with it, I'm sure, at this point anyways. Whatever I had kind of said about how well it was performing earlier is now pretty, like, flipped, just because it's just doing so well.
And like I said, this Angelic Knight just set up so much damage with this Blood Wolf, and now he's got a Spider with him to protect the extra damage that he created, so essentially he got a free Evo. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. He essentially got a free Evo out of his early turns, which is really nice for an aggressive deck to get here. So, and I really like it. Again, he's saving his Belphegors, but this is a situation, unlike the last game we saw Akamarured in, where he has the Belphegors in hand. He didn't have to worry about it last game. And they're going to be really tricky to play in this matchup. He wants to play him to push ahead, but if he does, it puts him at risk, especially now with the Crimson Sorcery in hand.
Right. Gosh, this is such an intense matchup to watch, honestly. Both decks are capable of so much damage and so much swinging, but neither can so consistently do it as to be able to predict how well it's going for either side.
Right. Yeah, it's really hard to know who's ahead. Like, it looks like Akamarured's ahead, but those Belphegors tell me a different story. Now, if he can draw cards outside of those Belphegors, he might be able to push this victory pretty cleanly like we saw last time with a Caraboss, but he doesn't have the same tools he did last time.
Now, if he doesn't manage to find a Karabos, then, you know, really just kind of makes me wonder, like, how is he going to push out that last bit of damage? Okay,
Wow.
has a lot of defensive options. Double Diabolic Drain is huge.
Wow, is all I have to say about that. That is like dream Belphegor draw. Drawing one is obviously great. It's like you're playing this with very high hopes that Diabolic Drain is one of the top 2 cards. When you get 2 of them, especially in a matchup like this, you're feeling pretty good.
Absolutely. Though, at the very least, Fatina doesn't seem to have too much trouble getting his way back into it. He's not too threatened with damage yet, though there's a lot of very tough top decks to deal with from Akamarured. Honestly, this looks really close to me. It looks like both of them are poised with so much damage. And both are already at about half defense remaining.
This is super close. As we see, Levi, Halo Golem, and Crimson Sorcery in hand for Fatina. So lots of damage stocked up. And still, Akamarured only has something like a Blood Wolf and a Razor Claw to kind of push out the remaining points if he chooses to Diabolic Drain this turn, which I can't imagine he'll leave behind.
I think that's way too much damage to risk, knowing he has a Crimson Sorcery left. Actually, it's so difficult for him to damage himself at all. I mean, this is where I think some of Blood's tools that deal damage to both players ends up being the most intense as well. He needs every point of defense he can have, but he has to give them up also to do the exact amounts that he wants to finish Fatina off with.
Actually, you know what he could do this turn? He could Snarling Chains and Evo over. No, okay, that's too risky. That's too much playing around. That's what he decides. This does make it more awkward for Emeralda next turn if Fatina keeps playing around Vengeance, though, which might have been one of the stronger options. Akamarured had to actually push a big chunk of damage. So, yeah, this is a good fight. This is a good old slobbing back and forth.
Also worth mentioning, Fatina has yet to find a Wizardess of Oz or anything like that, so it's not like he's going to get any massive tempo swing anytime soon. It's hard to dump this hand. No Earth Sigils either.
So let's do Fatina math right now. Let's say I Dance of Death the Belphegor, and then I Crimson Sorcery face this turn, right? That's my entire turn. So I've and maybe even I push with face instead of trading. That leaves the Bat left. That leaves a possible Dark General plus Razor Claw to potentially deal me 7 damage, 8 damage. Not quite lethal. I feel like he could play very aggressively this turn if he wanted to.
Yep,
especially after seeing 2 Diabolic Drains down.
Yeah, instead he decides to go very defensively, though I think there was a lot of strong reasoning behind that line of play, because if you went like full on it there, even decided to evolve even, he could have had a shot at finding another Levi, but also perhaps it's just like, I'm so low, I can't put Akamarured in Vengeance, I can't give it to him here. I need to play defensively, but you can only do that for so long. Sometimes there's only like so much time remaining until Vengeance Blood just figures out a way to push itself in and have enough left over to find that burst. And here we see Akamarured just going in for it.
Yeah, this is kind of the, I mean, Fatina could still find a way to manage to win this, but I don't think so with what he has in hand anymore. I think Fatina not pushing for aggro the turn that he could have is going to cost him the game here. I think he's just 1 turn behind now, and I don't think he's ever going to be able to find damage fast enough to stop Akamarured here.
Right. One of the strongest points of Burn Rune is sometimes its versatility. We've seen very often, because like Carl and Scrap Iron can kind of create these defensive tools to deal with a lot of the stuff that you could otherwise be just drowning in from Vengeance Blood. But in this matchup, it's just not looking like enough to me.
There's even a safe play here that Akamarured can make that will still set up lethal with going Angel to face and playing out the Saboir just to go back up to 9. And then it almost assures victory on turn 9 with the Emeralda into the Razor Claw. I don't think there's any way to Fatina pull out here. Unless... No, I don't even think Mutagenic Bolt would do it. It'd have to be Mutagenic Bolt with something.
I think if his next card is not Oz, then we're just not going to see Fatina find the tools he needs to get through this. And Akamarured just being absolutely as safe as he can about this. I'm still in Vengeance. I heal it too. You got bodies on board you have to deal with. Just what really can Burn Rune do about this?
Yeah. And at this point, it's just over. We already see lethal on hand from Akamarured.
Mm-hmm.
And the Sabrewer that can't even be dealt with already in play. This is just it for this game. So Akamarured, you know what? Vengeance Blood? I'm completely wrong about it. Apparently, it just annihilates. Annihilates Burn Rune. But I do think Fatina did have a chance to win. It was that really important turn that he needed to decide whether or not to push for aggro. I think with the context of his hand, he did not have what it took to play defensively. He did not have a rune for Master Mage Levi. You know what I mean? He did not have, a sigil. He did not have a sigil for the Halo Golem in his hand. So he didn't really have a hand that could push into a late game. I feel like he just needed to try to end the game, and he would have had a chance. But that's one of those things about Vengeance Blood. You just have to know the turns that you can do it, know the turns that you can't.
Right. I feel like Akamarured is piloting that list as well with a lot more comfort than Fatina had in some of those tougher turns where he had to make some tough calls like that. I mean, he's playing very, very quickly too, as some of those turns seem obvious or might have some very clear lines he has to go for. But we see there's really tough branches to kind of have to choose between. So anyway, that was a very, very important match to win, I'm sure. Vengeance Blood now out of the way. Fatina just still needing to find wins with both Burn Rune and everything else against things he's already lost to, but, you know, anything could happen.
Whereas I thought Fatina had an incredible edge, I think Vengeance Blood getting that first win off, especially after we saw how the last match played out, puts Akamarured in a very good situation here to win this match.
Without a doubt. So Aggro Forest versus this kind of a shadow list, though. I'm noticing something about this mid-shadow list is I feel, aside from the series, it's a little bit more tech on the side of trying to deal with control. That never really discounts it from a matchup. Being on the draw could be pretty rough for him here because of it, though.
And again, Akamarured just doesn't like drawing his Wood of Brambles. I don't, maybe he doesn't even play the card. It's terrible.
Should probably consider
I doubt
it.
that's the case. Yeah.
It would synergize really well with this list, in my opinion,
Yes, probably. I think you could do some work here. Akamarured just deciding or not if he wants to play this Elf Song for value, or if he wants to hold on to it for a possible pump. He does have some room here, because it's not like Fatina, with outside of a zombie party, can really deal with most of this board. So he could try to wait one more turn, but it looks like he's just going to go for the value.
Very interesting. Sometimes it can be tough to kind of make that call with Elf Song, where you don't know if you're going to draw an activator for it, but having those extra bodies is just going to be so important. It does have a Fairy Driver in hand, so it does promise burst later, but this is a pretty low value hand we're looking at right now.
Right. This might actually just be how we saw him win just the other game, right? He just deals as much damage as he can, gets out an Hyperion, and then just kind of finishes with whatever he has left.
At the very least, Fatina's going for some pretty solid measures to get it back onto the board here, and I think this Ligriel could be really huge.
Yeah, this fully clears the board, leaves no damage in play. So now Akamarured's going to have to find a way to win without getting the board back. I don't think at this stage that Forrest can really take the board back from Shadow, so he's going to have to draw his Roaches, maybe even another Hyperia, and just hope to dodge things like, Lurching Corpse or anything else that could kill something that would be otherwise not able to be killed in the form of ambush.
Yeah, though we saw him kind of pull off a miracle with Hyperia earlier, I don't think that mid-shadow is the same kind of list that's just gonna fall for that. Yeah. Probably
the instant Necro Assassin off the top. Yeah. That was played faster than I think he knew what to do with. He's just like, yep, here we go. Yep. Hup. Thank God.
Like, gut reaction, what could be more correct than that?
The funny thing is, too, if that Necro Assassin wasn't top decked, Akamarured did, in fact, top deck another Hyperia. So that could have just been enough for game already.
Right.
Trying to find another one, perhaps.
Lurching Corpse, Soul Conversion does it. Oof.
Gets there yet again. And I think that's about enough in my mind to seal this one.
Absolutely.
I think this one I actually understand what's going on, unlike the last time. And I think that I think Akamarured is just out of place here. I think this is it.
It just somehow figures out a Roach lethal with like 3 other cards in hand, no bounces or
If
anything.
if he
But-
lethals this turn, I'm gonna walk away from casting, and Rainy can take my spot. Because
he reveals the 0 cost fairies he had up his sleeve the whole time. But yeah, mid shadow probably not the list where you can pull off some shenanigans like before with Epuria.
Right. And being able to actually deal with both of those Hyperias off the top in such like quick order, very important. Because like I said, that this matchup could have completely flipped around. Hyperias both face for 7, leaves 2 damage left for either a Fairy Driver or Roach to clean up. So very important top decks for Fatina there.
Mm-hmm. Well, Fatina moving on from this, getting the one with mid shadow though, I don't think he's still in a particularly great spot. He's still gonna have to find the win with Burn Rune, but at least he's made it even here. I
didn't think that was gonna be the deck to like handicap Fatina, honestly. Burn